It started as a way for me to spend winter evenings when I was an out-of-work actor, and it started to come together as a reality when I showed it to a director that I was next employed with, a man named Jim Sharman.
I went to the Royal Court and directed a Sam Shepard play called The Unseen Hand. In that play I cast Richard O'Brien. As a result of doing the musical, there were a lot of musicals coming my way, and Richard said he'd written a musical. I said, I hope it's not religious. He turned out to have written the one musical that got its own cult.
He was asked to do a play in the main house, and he said, well, I'd like to do that very much, but would you allow me 5 weeks' fun upstairs with this little play called The Rocky Horror Show?
It was initially done very modestly and with a lot of sense of fun.
It was the very first thing I'd ever written, and I didn't even see it as writing, really. To me, it was just like doing the crossword puzzle or painting a picture, making a collage. I just wrote some songs. I say just. I wrote some songs which I liked. And I wrote some gags which I thought were funny. I put in some B-movie dialogue and B-movie situations, and I was just having a ball.
The Royal Court Theatre, where it started, which is kind of virtually a room, was kind of rocking with the vibrations. It's almost too small for it to be contained, the show.
It was playing 63 people a night, and for 5 weeks, and with a budget of £2,000. And the rest is history. We ran in London, we transferred twice, we ran in London for 7 years.
I took the part because Marianne Faithfull was on a trip with her guru in India, so I got the part instead of her. I auditioned and I sang a really 1930s type song. And I knew it was a rock and roll thing, and I couldn't sing rock and roll things. So I sang a 30s song by a woman called Jessie Matthews, called Over My Shoulder, the song was. So these guys who were interviewing me, they really thought I was most peculiar.
Oh, how did I get the job? Oh, well, I was working as a soda jerk in London. And Jim Sharman, the director, came in with a couple of other people involved, Brian Thompson and Richard Hartley. And because he'd heard that I would do tap dances while I served people their ice creams. And I performed for them, and I was offered the job.
Then Richard sang to me science fiction.
It came from outer space, and this is how the message ran.
And I thought, that's the most wonderful song I've ever heard. I mean, it was wonderful. So I went bouncing down the road and thought, I've got to be in this, because this song sounded so fantastic. And my agent said to me, well, just a minute, you'll be singing that song, but maybe it's only a 4-line part. I mean, you don't know, you haven't read the script yet. So you must go down to the Royal Court Theatre this evening, pick up the script. I went down to the Royal Court Theatre, picked up the script. There was the song, and Magenta was 4 lines.
You're lucky. He's lucky. I'm lucky. We're all lucky.
I said, I don't give a shit. I'm going to do it because it's the best song I ever heard.
It was really when I first heard science fiction double feature that I was hooked on what Richard had written and the notion of doing the show, and was able to persuade others, fortunately, including the initial London producer, Michael White, and the Royal Court Theatre to let us stage it.
The people involved in it really put them like aspects of themselves into their work in the actual play. When it became successful in London, which was a big surprise to all of us, it then moved to Los Angeles. Lou Adler saw it and took it over to Los Angeles. We then did a production in Australia, and then there was talk about the film, and it just seemed to roll along quite naturally that we would do a movie of it.
As the weeks went by, I realised it was a great kind of cult success, and it was nice to be in something which people were coming many times to see, and people were enthusiastically responding. The average player that has come, and certainly in England, politely clap.
When we did it here in LA at the Roxy, I mean, you would, every night there was somebody different there, and people like Carole King would come dressed up as one of the characters. And anytime Keith Moon was in the audience, there would be 9 bottles of champagne lined up, and he was in there several times. And you'd see at the end of the thing, 9 bottles of champagne, and everybody go, oh, Keith Moon's here. And it was a thing, Raquel, everybody came, Elvis came. I mean, that's why I met Elvis Presley, and that was an amazing thing. I mean, he held court. He invited myself and Tim Curry to meet him after the show. And, that was, I'm going to tell you, that was worth it. you know, forever, meeting Elvis.
I think that we'd all grown up with a kind of culture of late-night movies, and this musical kind of encapsulated that, but of course it also, underneath that surface, which was, you know, slightly cartoonish and sexy and enjoyable, and musically very, very strong, it also had a kind of sophistication that I think that was there from the beginning, and I think that was also involved very much the original people that were involved in it. It was one of the reasons that when the film happened, that I was very concerned that a number of those original cast members stayed with it through to the film, and that indeed with the involvement of other people that came on board, people like Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick and Meatloaf and so forth, that we maintained that level of essentially quite sophisticated people who were kicking their heels up, I suppose is the obvious analogy.
There seemed to be a bit of a tendency to do it as a more of a science fiction film, and I was a little bit against this because I thought that there was a bit more to it than that.
Probably the biggest question in turning it into a film was the kind of film that it would be. And I seem to remember an initial discussion with the producers whereby one was offered a reasonable budget and circumstances to make it, providing we stocked the film with kind of, you know, currently fashionable rock stars. The alternative was to use people like Tim Curry and so forth, who were in the original production, and do it on a very tight shooting schedule. I think it was about 6 weeks, with a very modest budget. And I went for that option, and that was probably a very crucial decision in relationship to everything that followed.
The whole nature of the film changed when we saw Oakley Court, which was used as the house in the film. What happened was that we were shooting out at Bray Studios, which is out on the Thames River past Windsor Castle, and next to it was what they called the Old House, which had been used for all the old Hammer horror films. And the guys there kept saying, "Do you want to go and see the Old House? Do you want to go and see the Old House?" And Jim and I kind of said, "Oh, well, yeah, sure, maybe, let's go and have a look." The minute we saw it, we realised that this gave us the basis for the whole look of the movie. I always thought it should be done in a very sort of a tacky sort of a way, and in fact, after going to see a movie in London, what it had this girl dressed up in this really sort of drab sort of costume with an ice cream tray, walked down the front of the cinema and turned around and looked at the audience, and this little spotlight came on her, and that gave us the start, that gave us the beginning of the way of doing the show, which was to set it in a kind of a derelict or a falling down cinema, so that we could do everything pretty much on the cheap. That was the reality of the situation. So I'd been looking for a kind of a through line from that into the film. Oakley Court was a fantastic old mansion that was under threat of demolition, and the people who had owned it took the lead off the roof, so that because they wanted to demolish it and use the land for something else, but it had a preservation order on the house. So by taking the lead off, the whole house had become totally kind of rotten inside, and that just gave us a wonderful look. I mean, the idea being that Frankenfurter and his and the people from outer space had landed and had chosen to stay in this place. That was the kind of the basis of the start of the film. Everybody who worked on the film was able to put into the movie things that they might have been obsessed by themselves at that particular time. That was the first time that, 1972 was the first time that I'd actually ever been to England or to Europe. So I'd been quite fascinated by seeing all of those, you know, the Louvre and the paintings there, the Sistine Chapel, all of the wonderful sort of things that I'd seen little photos of, but I'd never seen for real. And it just occurred to me personally that this would be a fantastic thing to include in the film, as though Frankenfurter himself had suddenly discovered all these things and wanted them for his home. And when I'm very fastidious about detail, they say, why are you worrying? I say, now listen, you know, in 5 or 10 years' time, we might be asked about this prop, you know, why is this glass here? Why is this, what's that note on the wall? You know, all those kind of things. And I think that was something that I've just found that all that truth is incredibly important. And I also find it makes it fun. I think you've got to believe, when you work in a film, you've got to believe everything about it. So you've got to actually make sure that every scene that you do, everything in it's real, right? That's the important thing. Well, real for those characters. we wanted to place it very firmly in kind of Middle America. I mean, not that I knew what Middle America was, except that I knew that they had kind of nice white churches, and we built that just outside of. In fact, that was in a paddock opposite the house, and just down from the studio. And all it was really, it was just the facade of that church. It was just to sort of set up normal. You know, Brad and Janet were very normal, and you'll obviously be aware of the fact that we set it on the date of Nixon's resignation. This was a very conscious decision so that we could kind of place it in history. There was actually a line that Brad had in the play, which was, he said...
it's probably some kind of hunting lodge for rich weirdos.
And I thought, I wonder what a hunting lodge for rich weirdos look like. It shouldn't be heads of, you know, normal things that you have, you know, mounted on a wall. And so I had things like cats and dogs, and because Frankenfurter didn't understand what people on Earth did with these things, which is I think why Brad referred to it as being a hunting lodge for rich weirdos. That was a starting point, and that was actually in the house proper, and we built the elevator in the sort of stairwell area there. I'd just been to Amsterdam, and I'd stayed in a really terrific sleazy hotel, which had off the kind of little bedroom and had a bathroom which was done in these pink tiles. And I took photos of this, and I thought that I could imagine Frankenfurter thinking that pink tiles was a good look, and that was the so that was the way that all started. The whole shape of it came from it actually came from the architecture of the house, but also it came from the fact that I just thought it needed to have that sort of slightly sort of theatre quality about, so that you had a little stage where, you know, Frank and Rocky could go into the bedroom with the curtains, and you had the kind of viewing platform for the Transylvanians. The idea of the birth of Rocky just came from a different idea rather than because, you know, I knew how all these other kind of Frankenstein films were done, and I liked the idea of it being done by colour, and that the way that Frank had worked it out was that you just had to create a rainbow, and that's how he created built the creature, and that was the you know, the scene where he adjusting all the colours. That was to form a kind of a perfect spectrum in the tank, and in fact on the day that we were shooting that, I had to, no one knew what the colours were. So I had to stand there and yell out to Timmy the colours. And if you watch the way that Tim Curry fumbles around to get those knobs, that was because he didn't know where they were. We tricked him. The idea for the thing that came down with the big balls on it was, the idea of that was to look like a big sort of a cocktail shaker, you know, as though Frank was going to kind of make himself a cocktail. I just wanted to make it exceedingly eclectic. In other words, bits and pieces from all over the place. In the house there was a very, very small ballroom, which we took a lot of castings off all the detail there, and we built the big room and the pool. Well, originally, that in the background to the pool, it was the RKO Pictures Tower. What I actually designed for that was a 20th Century Fox logo, and the idea was that we were going to have, you know, in the background of the logo there's the searchlights. They were going to be big bits of plywood on strings that Columbia and Magenta were going to be pulling, so it would be kind of jerking across the stage like that. I mean, the whole idea was to make it very kind of theatrical, and then just to kind of include the sort of the slightly Esther Williams kind of quality, so that Frank could take all his new chums for a swim. The taking off of the house was actually, we started building a full model of the house. It was going to be much, like, really big, and we ran out of money and we couldn't do it. And then someone said, look, we'll just do it by cutting a cardboard cutout. And that's what it was. It was just a cardboard cutout, a photo of the house, right, in front of the house. It just got, if you look at it very closely, you can see quite clearly the house is still in the background. It was a very low-tech special effect. In fact, it wasn't even a special effect, it was just an effect. I mean, that was the whole nature of the film, was that we didn't want it to have any of those kind of big tricks. When the executives from 20th Century Fox came over and we were filming the dining scene, I don't think I've ever seen people look more shocked in my life at what we were actually doing, because when we were setting the whole dining scene up, I just became aware of the fact that actually Magenta wasn't a very good maid, and Riff Raff certainly wasn't a very good butler, and they wouldn't know. They'd think, oh, people have lots of forks, you know, people have lots of knives. And so the whole idea of that came from them thinking they knew what to do, but in fact they didn't know what to do at all, and they were wonderfully incompetent.
It did every cliche in the book about every B movie. And I think even unbeknown to people, he hadn't even seen those B movies. it clicks as a cliche thing, you know.
Now, we were more interested in the 50s science fiction films where things were done on the cheap and it all looked like cardboard, and the films that I mentioned in the opening song, The Day the Earth Stood Still, those kind of movies, they're the kind of ones that I was more interested in, and we did view a lot of those at that time.